girls, grab your beers.
Hey everybody, this is Charlie from Anthrax, and you are listening to today's Boondoggle.
This is Mark Metcalf, and you are listening to today's Boondoggle with Bailey on Domain Cleveland Radio.
You are listening to today's Boondoggle with Bailey on Domain Cleveland Radio. Yes, Kato Kalin listens to this all the time.
Welcome to today's Boondoggle. Now here's your host.
I am Monty Heath, so one Heath, and you are listening to today's Boondoggle.
Hey, what's up? It's John from Skillet, and you are listening to today's Boondoggle on Domain Cleveland Radio.
Fasten your seatbelts.
Sonic Temple Art and Music Festival returns to historic Cruise Stadium. Slipknot, Disturbed, Pantera, The Original Misfits, Evanescence, Limp Bizkit, Judas Priest, Stain, Breaking Benjamin, A Day to Remember, Falling in Reverse, Sleep Token, Rise Again, 311, Seether, Mudvayne, and many more. May 16th through the 19th, Columbus, Ohio. Tickets on sale now at SonicTempleFestival.com.
What's going on, everybody? It's Bill Bailey with today's Boondoggle. And a real quick housekeeping note, if you're watching us on YouTube or Rumble or BitChute or Odyssey, please hit that follow and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple, Google, whatever podcast platform you utilize, please hit that follow and subscribe button so we can continue to bring you conversations like the ones I'm bringing you today. Catching up with my old friend, Mr. Tim Lambesis from the band Austrian Death Machine and As I Lay Dying. What's going on, buddy?
It's good to be here. Yeah, it's good to see you after a lot of it's been a few years at least, and it's good to see you.
Yeah, it's been quite a few years. I'm sure many PRs since, and all that good stuff.
I think my compound lift PRs are behind me because I'm starting to develop some disc issues in my lower back, but it doesn't mean that I'm not like struggling to live or anything like that. I just have to kind of figure out more efficient ways to hit muscle hypertrophy without, loading 400 or 500 pounds on the bar.
Yeah, man, I'm 50, going to be 51, and I'm still trying to get out there and lifting. But after my time in the service and everything is like, I got all kinds of joint and bone issues. So yeah, I'm the same thing. I just try and lift smarter, not harder, I guess,
Yeah.
Staying active. But anyway, usually when I have somebody on for the first time, I like to get a quick background. So do you remember originally what you wanted to be when you grew up?
My dad was actually a teacher at Arizona State University for a little while and loved it, but then wasn't able to properly, take care of the family with that kind of income and how hard it is for, I don't know the politics of like, academia, but like getting tenured as a professor and all that kind of stuff. So he ended up switching careers, but I remember just how fondly he spoke of it and how much he enjoyed it if the money and the politics wasn't an issue. And so I always thought like it could be a fun path. And part of that is just from the hearsay of what it was like from my dad's perspective. But, I guess I'll go with that as my backup job if this didn't work out.
Nice. And then what was it that like music kind of captured your ear and who were some of your early influences?
Well, the earliest influences we're talking about, you and I both, the age before the internet, before you could, if you went to a record store, you were really gambling on like what you bought. You had no idea, like looked at the album cover and it's like, oh, that looks like it might be like heavy. Let me buy this, and so the heaviest stuff I was aware of like as an early teenager, like 13-ish, like probably even younger, maybe like 11 and 12 would have been, there was a couple Pantera songs they play on the radio. And of course, like Metallica. And it was during like the thrash heyday, when I was born in the end of 80. So like that puts the thrash heyday right around when I was like, becoming a metal consumer. So it was all those, those original thrash wave bands.
Nice. And then you grew up in the San Diego area?
Yeah, I did ever since I was 7 years old. So, yeah, the vast majority of my memories are out here in this area, like the suburbs of San Diego.
And what was that music scene like when you were getting involved in it?
San Diego is like, at least at the time, kind of had like that. Well, of course, it still has the surf culture, but the surf culture really crossed over with like punk back then, and so it was largely like the California punk bands were the biggest in terms of underground music. Like metal wasn't talked about along with my classmates as often, although there were metalheads and stuff like that. But like everybody loved. Like I remember the first non like big arena show, like actual like club show that I went to was Bad Religion back when I was I think 13 years old, and so that was the energy from punk is like sort of ingrained in my roots, and that's why I think the As I Lay Dying stuff is a little bit fast paced and more thrashy compared to maybe some of our peers who maybe grew up on some like the more mid tempo kind of stompy metal stuff. But of course, as a guitar player, or when I started playing guitar, and writing riffs, I just thought metal was so much more interesting, and that's how I eventually got more into metal.
Yeah, what originally attracted you to take up guitar?
So when I was in high school, my two closest friends, one of them was already a great guitar player, and then he was teaching my other friend to play guitar, and I felt like left out. I had like FOMO. My buddies are all doing something cool musically, and I loved music. I always I was always the one turning them on to new punk bands and stuff like that. So I was the guy with my ear to the ground about that stuff. And I just said, well, dudes, like, can I at least like play bass? Will you at least teach me enough? So I like sort of, my one friend taught my other friend who taught me. And then I started to learn bass. And then, no offense to high schoolers, I don't think anybody can be offended because high schoolers most of the time suck at writing songs, but none of us were good at writing songs. And so I thought to myself, like, well, if I want to become a songwriter, I need to move from bass to guitar. And so I started picking up the guitar to start riffing a little more and, really focused on songwriting.
Nice. And then when was it, like you said this was like around high school that you started connecting with?
Yeah, so like I think I was nearly 17 by the time I finally learned to play an instrument. So it's just a different era, because now, I mean, if you're interested in playing guitar and you're 10 years old and you have access to YouTube, you could learn more in 2 weeks than I learned in like 2 years.
Yeah. And then it said, I read that you were voted most like Jesus as a teen. Was that in high school too?
Yeah, there was a lot of like different styles of awards in sports because I went to a Christian high school. So, there was like the leadership oriented awards, and then of course like your athleticism on the field type awards, and I forget the exact title of it, but it was some type of award that was like the person on the football team that, I can't remember the exact phrasing of it, but kind of like that person that the other people felt like was really helping them grow in their faith and stuff. And that was like, my high school had this interesting culture of a crossover between athleticism and spiritual growth. Gotcha.
Yeah. And then so you played football for the high school team. Is that when you kind of got exposed to bodybuilding as well?
Well, just the necessity of being stronger as a football, basketball player. I had an incredible work ethic. I think that I have a lot of faults in my life, but work ethic has never been one of them. And I was the guy on the team that felt like we could as a team, or I could as an individual be a better asset if I was lifting weights. So like I got really into it for my last couple of years in high school, and then as soon as I finished high school and I didn't have a reason to do that anymore, I just stopped from basically like late 18, like 19 years old essentially, all the way until I turned 30. I didn't really hardly touch. I mean, maybe I went to the gym just to like hang out with some buddies once in a while, but like I didn't have any kind of a consistent workout routine for at least a decade.
Gotcha. And then when did As I Lay Dying come together?
Let's see. I started writing some of the songs that became As I Lay Dying in like 2000, and then we made our first debut record in 2001. So I guess that puts me at, let's see, I was 20 years old when we made our debut record, and 19 when I started writing those songs.
And then when did you know that you had something, with this band and started actually getting out and hitting a lot of those venues that you talked about seeing like Bad Religion at yourself?
Yeah, well, at 13 years old, is when I became a fan of like underground music. So I just started trying to go to any show that my parents would let me go to. And it's actually kind of funny looking back. I don't know how we all convinced our parents to let us go see Bad Religion, but we did. It was me and a handful of friends. And not that they're particularly, I think they're not particularly like a wild or crazy band or anything, but just with that name coming from a Christian high school, I thought it was kind of interesting. Yeah, and then in terms of songwriting, when I felt like music went from like me being just a fan that just picks up my guitar and tries to like keep up with things I enjoy to like having a potential to make a career out of it, I'd probably fast forward all the way till it wasn't until 2004 that I felt like there was a potential for a career there.
Nice. And then when did Austrian Death Machine become a project for you? I mean, other than the being a big fan, I guess, of the Governators, what else inspired you to start this project?
Well, I think like every personality has multiple outlets. There's that really serious philosophical thinker in each of us, and for some people that's a very small piece of them, and then everybody has like a very silly, like just wanting to tell jokes type outlet. Everybody has that, and it's like, well, for me, everything I do and did with As I Lay Dying was so heartfelt that I just was like, well, that's not the entirety of who I am. I also just want to have fun sometimes, and this felt like a really fun outlet for me having balance to my personality.
Yeah, nice. And then like what was what was going on around that time period, like with I'm trying to remember when you first started that, like, was Arnold the governor around then?
He was, yeah. He was the governor, and As I Lay Dying was making the album An Ocean Between Us, and that album was taking so long because it was back in the day when it was before I learned. I mean, we still program drums a lot of times on our demos and stuff, but it was just really rough programming. It was now I could program drums down to the detail of how I want every last drum fill and every last little accent to be, and so there's less of a reason for it to take forever till I finally get to track my vocals. I mean, we could write a demo in one day and I could track my vocals, and then they can finish, recording the real drums like a month later. But back then I had to wait for everybody to finish their parts before I could do my vocals. And I remember just sitting in the studio, just like, man, like this is taking forever. I'm bored. And I would go into the other room and just pick up my guitar and just start riffing, and the next thing you knew, I had written the whole Austrian Death Machine record before we even finished tracking the As I Lay Dying record.
Nice. And then you mentioned that album Ocean Between Us. I remember too, like I was deployed around that time, and like back because of my involvement in music promotions and stuff back then, back before zip files or streams and stuff, they mail you the hard copies to review and stuff. And I remember that's kind of when I first got a taste of you guys. I would be playing it at the gym over in Kuwait and stuff. And then like I remember when I came home, my my whole life had changed. I came home and I had 2 kids and everything was kind of falling apart in my life. I was struggling with alcohol and drugs and everything. And then, I like basically hit my bottom and kind of over there listening to you guys and like Demon Hunter and stuff like that, like a seed was planted. And I think I remember sharing this story with you when we finally met, or like seeing you guys perform live was a live festival, Christian music festival here in Ohio. And I was with my kids and I remember like reaching out to Frank. I'm like, hey, I know you've toured with these guys before. Can you connect me with Tim? And that's how then we ended up, connected and getting together. And like that was like very early on in my spiritual walk and stuff. And I remember like, just talking with you and picking your brain and being like, wow, I can still listen to metal and heavy music and stuff and be a Christian. You know, I can, and like you said, have fun with like Austrian Death Machine and stuff like that, you know? And then it was around that time too, where I got the news that, you know, was a very dark time for you. Care sharing like what you've learned from that time and how that has made you who you are today?
Yeah, I mean, well, first, I mean, just in terms of your deployment and the physical and mental toll that takes on a person, like I can't pretend to know what that's like in any way, but I can say that I'm very honored to have been helpful in that process to help in any kind of way. I know there's a lot of things that help you sort of feel like you're, you know, bouncing back from such a difficult experience. And if anything I created musically helped you with that, I mean, that feels really cool for me to hear this. So like, thank you. You know, that's super.
Yeah, man, definitely.
Yeah, that encourages me a lot in terms of to address that darker period of my life, you know, and just to call it what it is, the greatest failure and mistake and hurt that I have ever caused you know, another human being in my life. I think moving from that point of feeling sorrow, of focusing on my own pain to realizing, you know, the pain, there's the pain that's in the world that I've created, and then the pain that exists in the world and so many other people, and to realize that the depths of my selfishness, to be so focused on what my pain was. You know, if a lot of times I have met a lot of fathers along the way that you know, are losing contact with their children, and they can't do anything about it, and they're trying to stay involved in their kids' lives, and they're feeling pushed out, and they're going through pain, and they handle it very, very well. And when I look at myself, you know, I made the worst possible decisions during that time of my life. And so just coming to grips with that rock bottom of selfishness, you know, it's pretty shocking to like think back that, you know, that's where my mind went during those dark times. But the best thing I could do is just make sure that like I'm nowhere near there. I'm nowhere near, and never will again in my life be at a point where I ignore other people's pain so much to focus on my own.
And then what has that journey like been like, kind of like, I guess I remember like, you know, hearing the news, and I had your number back then, which yeah, I don't even know if it's still the same, but I remember reaching out to you, man, just checking on you, seeing how you were doing before you went in. And then like, what was that time of like, you know, I mean, you had nothing but your being in your thoughts during that time. What was that like to kind of like, you're stuck facing yourself and then going through that? Because I know when I first got sober and in recovery, you know, I was it was kind of like, I mean, I can't compare to, you know, what you may have experienced, but I know for me, it was just like, you know, I did a lot of harm to the mother of my kids. I put my kids through a lot of stuff when I was in active addiction and stuff too, you know, and then I had to face that person, and then, you know, work in recovery now, and God willing, March 1st, I'll have 15 years now sober.
Congrats.
You know, but thank you. But, you know, just, but like you said, it's like, we can only say so much. What, you know, it's the actions and who we're becoming today and what we do, you know, to make those living amends and stuff. What was that time like in there for you to process and then come out and say, you know, I got to turn things around?
Yeah, I mean, the most clear thing to me in that situation is that if I prove with the rest of my life, and it, for most people on this planet, well, not most, but for many people on this planet, it will take nearly the rest of my life for them to believe that that is an isolated event in my life. But if I want to show to anybody that this was an isolated event in my life where I really went down a dark path, then I just, you know, I have to come out of that incarceration experience being nothing but an asset to society and the people that I, you know, that I work with. And I feel like where I've gone with my life in the aftermath of this is, you know, I can't promise everybody's going to get along with me or forgive me for my past, but in terms of like what I do going forward, I mean, I'm just trying to overcome that. And I think that over a long period of time, that's the only way to show it. I can't come out of there rushing to be like, please accept me now after, I got out of prison yesterday, and please believe that I'm a changed person. I have to know that for some people, they're willing to visit me while I'm in prison and accept that I changed before I even got released. But for other people, they want to see 20 years under my belt, so I just don't try to speed that process along and just accept it.
Yeah, I can, once again, it's like I said, it's different, but somewhat the same, because it's like I right away when I first got sober, it's just like I wanted everybody to accept me as like, hey, I'm changed. I'm not going to hurt you anymore. Everything's good. Forgive me. And I realized working these steps and working with a sponsor and working the program is just like, that's a process, Yeah. And, and, I still mess up quite a bit. I mean, Jesus Christ is still my higher power in my life, but I screw up quite often, but I love hearing other redemption stories, man. I think other people need to hear those. It gives hope. Like you said, your music's inspiring, and as dark as this whole journey has been, I think you could still, you're turning it into a light.
I do accept that there's some people in my life that, maybe in some way they forgive me, or maybe in some way that they've advanced into how they feel about the whole situation. But in terms of, when they see me, they're reminded of traumatic feelings, or there's some sort of trigger that comes to the surface for them. So like the mere thought of me, regardless of who I am now, they think of what it is they see in the association they see with me. And so some people will never see me for who I am now, and some people may never see you for who you are now. But I think that the important part is that if you truly feel like you've made the progress in your life to continue to be better, and you have, and I think you have a greater chance of, by the way, you probably have 15 years sober. I would imagine, you've mended everywhere that you need to mend for the most part, but I'm sure you remember in part of the process, sometimes there's literally nothing you can do. Just the mere presence of you existing would make some people upset, and that's a weird part about being a public figure, is that sometimes a person who's never had a conversation with me and whose life I didn't affect whatsoever feels incredibly hurt by me. And I will never have a chance to have a rational conversation with that person.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, like I was saying, it's like, even though, it's like, there's still some people, it's just like that I need to let go of things, that, forgiveness is something that I need to do for others that I feel wounded me, but then I actually, wounded them in the process. And then there was what was I going to say? And there's some people that will just, like you were saying, will never, accept it. And I'm not in control of their reactions or how they feel. I can't control that. I can only control, how I'm going to react and how I'm going to grow and learn from my mistakes. But I read also that one of the things that you've been doing too is you got certified as a addiction counselor. Is that true?
Yeah. So while I was incarcerated, I did a bunch of courses to get a handful of different degrees, but the one that I felt was the most applicable to like my path going forward is the courses I had to take to become a certified addiction treatment counselor. And so when I was first released, the first job I had was to work in an addiction treatment facility, and originally just kind of working behind the scenes as an intern, and then eventually a case manager and group facilitator, doing group therapy kind of stuff. And those situations are great because it's not about me or my story, or it's about understanding the principles and being able to facilitate a group, and it's not about like leadership and telling people what to do or anything, but it's about just helping people. And as a case manager, I felt like I really cared and did a great job. And then music, of course, picked back up, and I couldn't do both because it's not like you can go in 1 or 2 days a week as a case manager and work, because then there's no stability for the clients, right? So it's kind of like you either got to be there on a regular basis, or you got to have somebody else take over the job. And so I wish that there was a way for me to like hybridize what I was doing. And that's partly why I started I co-founded a nonprofit, or sorry, the nonprofit already existed, but I co-founded a division of a nonprofit that is helping people who are previously incarcerated or coming out of addiction treatment to get meaningful employment so that they can really be on a path to continue to survive and do well, rather than just like working a minimum wage job and barely paying their bills and having that draw to, fall back into like old life patterns.
Awesome. And then, as you were saying, like, music's always been in your blood, and it started calling you again. Started getting As I Lay Dying going again. But why would you say now is the right time for Austrian Death Machine to I'll Be Buck?
So originally, I was going to have the Austrian Death Machine record come out after this next As I Lay Dying record, because I felt like at that point, well, let me back up a little bit. I felt like if I were to release Austrian Death Machine shortly after everything that I had gone through, and I think people would be like, hey, this guy just got out of prison and he's trying to like go out there and be silly, and it doesn't come across right, and I don't think that just because a person did time means they can't ever tell a joke again, but I do think that there's like jokes are all about timing, right? And if you're like coming out of traumatic experience and you're just like telling silly jokes, I just think that's just really distasteful. So I wanted to wait a certain amount of time. So I wanted to wait at least until after the first As I Lay Dying record. And then I thought, okay, well, after the second one, that's for sure going to be enough time. And then what happened is just the As I Lay Dying record took so long that I had this Austrian Death Machine record sitting here just like ready to go for like the last year almost. And I decided, okay, well, let me switch the order, but I do feel like the timing is appropriate at this point.
Yeah. And when can we expect you guys to be playing at the Arnold Classic?
Well, question for you. Do they have bands? I've never been to the Arnold Classic, oddly enough, but do they have bands performing there?
I've never seen bands perform there. I mean, I've seen like, they do jiu-jitsu competitions and obviously weightlifting competitions and stuff like that. But you guys could be the first, man. We should plant a seed.
I do like the crossover between the bodybuilding community and fitness, the fitness community and metal. I feel like in general, those things need to cross over more. So I'm down.
Awesome. And then, so Quad Brutal, it's coming out February 23rd. Other than Not Missing Leg Day, what inspired the name for this album?
Well, naturally, I mean, it's like Total Brutal, Double Brutal, Triple Brutal. And then, I had to have the number 4 in there somewhere. So, I mean, Quad Brutal plus the concept of Arnold holding the whole world like in a squat position to me seemed like a good representation of that. And then it also gave me a good excuse because of the quad term, to have a little bit more emphasis on crossover between fitness and metal, like I had referenced about performing at the Arnold Classic. So, I just think it was great timing and thematically, as well as, a necessity to have the word 4 in there.
Nice. And then, I'm checking out the preview of the album and stuff. Opening track, No Pain, No Gain. It sets the stage basically, for, Austrian Death Machine is back and here we go. And except for today, obviously, because I'm under the weather, but this past week when I've been going into the gym and hitting my reps, I've been playing it to get ready to talk with you. But I was checking out the video and I noticed, well, a couple things, but I enjoyed are you guys like fans of the carnivore diet, would you say?
I think there's like a little bit of poke fun at certain stereotypes within the bodybuilding community. One, I think there's a lot of hugely good benefits to the carnivore diet that primarily are based, in my opinion, off the idea that you're not eating processed foods and you're only eating the highest quality, like actual good meats, which do have tons of nutrients in them. And of course, if you went to the store and got the average ground beef or the average, chicken breast, it doesn't really have very many micronutrients. But when you eat high quality meats, I mean, there's definitely, beef liver being a perfect example of like very high level of micronutrients as well as the protein and all that stuff. But I just wanted to be as over the top as possible and sort of poke fun at some of the like, stereotypes within the fitness community.
It's funny too, because it's like I was out shopping for it, and I like to joke around too, but I guess I shouldn't joke when it's Valentine's Day. I got my girlfriend like a little Valentine's care package this week and gave it to her, and one thing I had in there was the shake weight. I seen made a cameo in the video as well.
Yeah, I mean, all the like hilarious parts of fitness over the years. I mean, if we can't be self-aware, and I say we, I mean the fitness community can't be self-aware enough to, to laugh at ourselves every once in a while, then it's, it makes going to the gym every day, feel so fatiguing.
Yeah. It's speaking of fatiguing, like I said, today I was listening to my body, I want to fight this cold, but there's some days I get up, and I'm just like, I feel like I didn't sleep well. I had half a tank, but don't be lazy, man. I get it. I check out, I was playing Don't Be Lazy, and it was just like, I got to push myself in there. And both of these videos, very entertaining, but I also noticed we have an old Cleveland transplant now that's been working with you guys. I got to give a shout out, of course, and mention to Craig Golias.
Yeah, so Craig's interesting story. His background being from Cleveland, and while they didn't have they don't have recordings on Spotify, he was in some metalcore band, or a metalcore band at least, back in like 2000, 2001. So he's been a part of the music scene before he was ever a bodybuilder, but then naturally has had a lot more success with bodybuilding than he has with music.
I remember running into him at Peabody's back in the day at shows and seeing him play, and we would talk, and then I see him now online. The dude's got his own zip code and everything. He's so big.
Yeah, he does.
But I love too that you guys are rolling up on your motorcycles, and then he comes rolling up on it. I guess a trike would have been like really impossible, but it was still funny seeing him roll up on a BMX. So
yeah, I'm shocked that bike the frame's not bent.
Yeah, exactly. And then as you mentioned, he had played in some metalcore bands here in Cleveland back in the day. But how did you guys originally connect?
So he's been doing kind of having fun with the metal thing. Like he'll on his Instagram page, there'll be an 80s pop hit, and he'll be driving around in his car screaming along to it with his brutal metal voice. So I knew that he had a good metal voice from just being silly, but he really loves super brutal heavy music. And then I guess you maybe call it a mutual friend, a mutual follower of ours, had written us both and be you guys need to work out together because you're both the biggest. I mean, I'm not anywhere near Craig's size, but in terms of for the music world, there's not very many people that are above 250 pounds or at least above 250 pounds on the slightly more muscular side. And so she's like, well, you're the largest. I'm sure there's other people out there that are larger, but in terms of the way that she presented, you're the largest guy that does metal, and this guy is the biggest dude in the world that happens to also like metal, and you guys need to get a workout together and figure it out. And we started we grabbed a workout together, we hung out, we started just kind of becoming friends, and then the more we became friends, the more natural everything was to just do some songs together.
Nice. And then also, I guess somewhere in my family tree, we got some bodybuilding bloodline or whatever, because I noticed you guys work with Rob Bailey also. Mm-hmm. How did that come together?
So Rob and I met maybe 12-ish years ago or so. And Rob's one of those guys where he likes what he likes. He's not worried about criticism. He's not worried about, what's cool or what's not cool. He's the real deal. And I've always respected that about him. And because of that, we've always kept in touch. And even through, everything that I went through, he wasn't scared to still be my friend. And there's some people, just names aren't important, but there's some people who, when I got out, they're oh yeah, I still like you as a person. I still care about you as a person, but I don't want to be publicly associated with you in any way, and that's happened many times. As the Dying is trying to figure out who we should do this show with or that show with. And some people have had that approach, and Rob just ever since, he's you know what, you made a mistake. You're my friend, but I know you're a good dude. And I've always loved hanging out with you. And we, I just always wanted to do something with him. And I sang a song on his, I don't know, it's an album or EP or because we're living in the world of digital singles, so, but I sang a song with Rob. It came out a few months before this album's about to come out on the 23rd, and yeah, it wasn't like you scratch my back, I scratch yours kind of. It just was like we love supporting each other, and so it was a great opportunity to do that.
Nice. And then, like you were saying, I got, maybe it's a Bailey thing too, but I remember, I think, I was still like reach out to you now and then when you first got out, and then it was just like life happens, and but I will never forget, like, during my time of early growth and early on in my walk, and like I said, how your music helped me when I was deployed, but also like having your ear to lean on, dude. This is like, I'm grateful for what you were doing for me during that time period, and hope I didn't like feel like I was one of the guys that abandoned you, but like I said, life kind of happens.
No, not at all. I actually, and there's a whole other side of it too, is I get so overwhelmed. I don't keep I have to keep up with social media, like it still exists, but I don't keep it on my phone, because just the idea of like that many messages on a daily basis just makes me feel so overwhelmed. So I sometimes am just like relatively off the radar, even people are trying to get in touch with me. But no, I mean, I appreciate, I've always known that about you, and I know that even though I've changed phones like 5 times, you know what I mean? I know where your heart's at, and I appreciate that. And by the way, I didn't realize it's already been 15 years. That 15 years of sobriety, that's a huge deal. So that's
yeah, not yet. March 1st, but yeah. Almost there.
Yeah.
Like I said, I mean, I don't see myself, slipping, but I don't want to get cocky either.
Right. But I mean, humans are creatures of habit and healthy routines, and we're always moving in one direction or another. So if you got healthy routines and you're doing good, man, I think that's inspiring to other people, and I love the recovery community, because I think that everybody that's been mad at themselves and failed in some way and hit some version of rock bottom, they know what it's like to let other people down, and they know what it's like to be mad at themselves, and they know what it's like to try to crawl back from that, and then eventually be on 2 feet and standing tall again. And that's just, it feels like my people, and so I really am thankful to be in any way involved in the recovery community.
Yeah, man. And we're glad to have you. I also got to touch on your video for Kill the Machines, because this is I see she made a couple cameos in the other videos, but this is like you and your current wife together, fighting the machines. You want to share a little bit about how you guys came together, and obviously she's got a love of metal as well.
Yeah, so when I did No Pain No Gain was the first song for Austrian Death Machine I'd recorded for this record, and just that I'd recorded in about 10 years. And when Craig Golias was the guest vocalist on that, and when he came over to my studio, Craig's a really big guy, and I'm sure to some people, like if they saw him in person, they'd be very intimidated by his size, but he's such like also just a nice and even like borderline like slightly shy at times guy. And so when I was trying to get everything going and check the microphone and just make sure that like everything was ready to capture his guest vocal, he was just kind of like, I don't know the best way to say this, but he was being a little bit shy that day. And Dany had a couple, she's not in sobriety. She also doesn't go crazy with it, but she'd had a couple drinks, so she was feeling a little bit more confident than usual. And she said, "Well, let me get in there. Let me try that. Let me test that thing out." And had never screamed in a microphone before, and just let it rip. And all of us in the room were just mind blown. Like, not only did she just go for it, but it sounded incredible. And we all just took a step back and we're like, wow, like that's not going to work on this song, because this song wasn't written for her, but we got to get her on a song. And then, I deliberately wrote parts for her, and Destroy the Machines was right up her alley in terms of what she loves, like that very thrashy, aggressive, super high energy kind of stuff. So it was a perfect fit for her.
Nice. And then speaking of Destroy the Machines too, it's just like how, I mean, obviously big Arnold fan, big Terminator fan and stuff, as am I, but seeing where we're at today compared to when those movies came out, with Tesla and DARPA and AI and everything today, how much are you feeling like you're seeing art imitate life? You know,
Yeah, it's like I don't mean to use this word in any sort of offensive, sacrilegious way, but it feels like slightly prophetic, like the AI is slowly going to take over, whether we want it to or not. You know, and well, you know, while we're like kind of kidding around about it now, I know there's actually been, you know, other people, even Elon Musk as the guy, you know, at the head of Tesla, he's even warning about it. You know, so it's like this weird thing where Austrian Death Machine's fun and lighthearted, but we're also dealing with a very culturally relevant issue. You know, and so I kept it, of course, to the fun side, and the video has, you know, like 50 people wearing endoskeleton masks and stuff, and they're all just like moshing around with us, and it was a really fun video to make because all the extras that were there, they were just like in great spirits, like high energy, and you know, we asked a lot of them, and video shoots aren't always like fun, and they made it fun.
Nice. Yeah, but like you were saying, it's like you know, sometimes people don't want to get bogged down with depressing things, but you're able to kind of wake people up in a fun way, you know, get people maybe thinking, you know.
Yeah, at least if they're talking about it, it's a very relevant topic. I don't think we're at the point where we need to go, you know, set off a bomb at Skynet or anything like that, but you know, but we definitely need to make sure that we're responsible with all this stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then I got to give a shout out to your one guitar player that wears the helmet and smokes the cigar, man. I mean, it's just such a good fit. Who's that, and how'd you guys connect?
So that's Mark McDonald, and he's actually done guitar solos on, like, going back to the first Austrian Death Machine record, Total Brutal. I think he did 4 of the guitar solos on that record. So he's done more guitar solos, and then he, you know, did the cover songs on Double Brutal, because it was like a double disc back when CDs were still a thing, and the whole second disc was all like thrash cover songs. He did all those guitar solos plus a couple on the originals, and so he's done more guitar solos than any other guitar player for Austrian Death Machine, and he's like the kind of the cornerstone of what Austrian Death Machine is in a live context. So he's like the most committed character. You know, he's got that the you know, I think it's more like a football paint, but you know, like the under eye black,
yeah, the helmet, yeah. I dug his style, man. And then, like you were saying, with the album names and the theme that you're going with, you stuck. It looked like the same artist. Who does the artwork for these?
Yeah. So when I was younger, I always thought some of the old. I don't necessarily consider myself like a super big Megadeth fan, but I always, and I'm not, I don't dislike them either. I sort of feel somewhat neutral because Dave Mustaine's voice is sometimes hard to get into, but there's a lot of cool musical parts. So I kind of have my ups and downs as like what I like and don't like about Megadeth. But their album art back when I was a kid, Rust in Peace, the album art was incredible, you know. So that's Ed Repka who did that. He did a couple of those albums back in the day, and then he's done tons of thrash metal stuff if you ever look up his name. But yeah, Ed Repka, and he's done everything for Austrian Death Machine so far.
Nice. I just had Jim from Morbid Saint on the podcast, and he did their cover work as well. So yeah,
he's a thrash metal legend. I mean, he crosses over into other subgenres too, but yeah, he's a legend artwork wise.
Nice. And then you were so, you know, once again, like the album comes out February 23rd. It's Napalm Records.
Yes.
And like, what can fans of Austrian Death Machine expect with this?
I think it's the most diverse sonically because it's like, you know, speaking of Craig Golias, like when he did vocals, he was talking about stuff that he really likes, and so I try to write stuff based off of what Craig likes. Craig really likes some of the modern, really super heavy stuff, but he also likes the Shadows Are Security era of As Lay Dying. And so I try to write a couple songs like a little bit more towards that direction for Craig to sing on, and then some like super crazy heavy ones that are heavier than anything I've ever done. And of course, there's always going to be some like thrash songs, like the majority of the Austrian catalog. So it's by far the most diverse record, and I think on average probably the heaviest.
Nice. And if fans want to, you know, keep up to date with what's going on with Austrian Death Machine, where would you send them?
I have AustrianDeathMachine.com up, and I'm about to revamp it to be a little bit more detailed. But I mean, that's a good starting spot. I'm going to be announcing a European tour this Friday, and then we're still figuring out the details for some U.S. dates, because we're going to do a probably two separate, like 2-week runs in the U.S. for Austrian Death Machine. Also, I just got to iron out those dates, but it's going to be a very busy year because I have an As the Dying record coming out later in the year, and so I'll be all over the globe this year. But yeah, my own personal social medias are always a good spot, or AustrianDeathMachine.com.
Nice. And will Craig be hitting the road with you guys for that?
Well, Craig is not exactly the easiest guy to accommodate in terms of like physical space. So if we're all crammed into like a tiny little van, driving around the country, I don't think that's probably going to be the best fit. But I definitely want Craig to do whenever possible. I think it'd be awesome. So, I mean, he's from Las Vegas, which isn't also too far from Southern California. So I think all the stuff surrounding where he's at, and I guess I'll just talk to Craig and see where he feels like he can make it.
It'd be nice to have a Cleveland homecoming with him as well, if you guys could fit that in. So that'd be cool. But yeah, I could see being in a van, with a bunch of protein shake farts and everything. Wouldn't it be,
Well, so like, 3 people could sit on a bench in a van, but in Craig's case, I think he would need the whole bench, so.
Exactly. And then, like I mentioned earlier, As I Lay Dying is going to be hitting the road this summer as well. And we'll be seeing you playing Inkcarceration Festival. Chimera's back, and they're going to be on that bill. A bunch of other bands that you've toured with. Are you pretty stoked to be playing that Danny Wimmer Festival? And have you guys played them in the past?
Yeah, no, we've never. When I originally went away, I don't think the Danny Wimmer festivals were like anywhere. I mean, they may have existed, but they weren't anything like what they are now. And then, all these years later, this is actually our first Danny Wimmer festival we're playing. I think that to thank him and the people putting on Inkcarceration, I think it's a cool return to the festival thing for As I Lay Dying in the U.S. We've been doing the European festivals for at least a few years now, but I think this opens the door for us to, where it makes sense, start playing some of the U.S. festivals again.
Yeah, and and the irony of you being able to play at a Inkcarceration.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's probably an appropriate I don't know, metaphoric place for me to come back.
Have you ever been in your travels? Have you ever been to the reformatory there in Mansfield?
Back like not for an event, but I actually back in the day when we were just really DIY, going from city to city, barely making gas money. We had a couple days off in Ohio, and I wish I remember the name of the band, but there was a local Ohio band that we played shows with, and we had 2 days off. We had nowhere to go, just time to kill, and they said you can crash with us, and they lived really close to there, and we went to go visit it.
Nice.
And it's such a blur, so it's actually going to feel different when I go back. But they've also done a few movie scenes there, right?
Yeah, Shawshank Redemption, and a lot of music videos and some other movies and stuff. But Shawshank's the big one.
Yeah. So I mean, I was there, and man, it's crazy. That was probably back in like 2002 or something like that. So it'll be cool to be back there more than 20 years later.
Yeah. And then, what is some of the goals that you have, going forward with both these projects?
Well, with the As I Lay Dying stuff, I think just showing people that where we're at in our career is, in no disrespect to some of the other bands, but some bands, when they get to as far along in their career as we are, they start lightening up or putting out, records that are, I think, less exciting than their previous material. And I think for us, it's really cool. I feel like a second wind with As I Lay Dying, to where it's like this record has a lot of really cool, intense parts, a lot of really great, intricate melodies and cool guitar work and stuff. And so just showing people that we're just as passionate and energetic about where we're at as we've ever been. That to me is like what's important. And then with Austrian Death Machine, because it's not my primary source of income, I just want everything I do to be enjoyable. Like I wouldn't do it unless I was having a good time.
Yeah, for sure. And before we get ready to wrap up, Tim, I want to ask you a couple of questions I normally ask guests I have on. Going back to some of your musical influences, who would you say today are your top 3 musical artists?
Man, that's a tricky one in terms of today, because I think when it comes to songwriting, my subconscious mind is what does most of the work, So growing up listening to those old thrash bands, it's still just ingrained in there. Like there's like, even if I'm writing metalcore songs and not trying to be as thrashy, it just still comes, it just shines through. And even if it's just the energy or the tempos, that's what it just stuck in my head. But in terms of keeping up with modern trends, I mean, I think what Wage War is doing is really cool, because they found a way to sort of create their own sound in a very extremely oversaturated like musical genre, and that's pretty rare. So I think they stand out in terms of the modern, maybe more accessible type of bands. But I don't have like a ton of examples, unfortunately, because like a lot of modern music listeners, I like certain singles and certain songs, and I go to bands' Spotify's and I check out a few songs, but I don't really like their whole catalog, So I can't really stand behind like too many bands.
And what's the last book that you read?
It's a good question. I've been on the as a lot of people are on like the podcasts, like or people summarizing studies through like I guess it'd be like video journaly podcast kind of thing. So I've been doing that like for this last year primarily. Trying to think the actual last book that I read. Man, I don't think I read a book this entire last year, because I listened to so much podcasts and just studies in general. I'm not actually an expert by any means in fitness stuff, but the amount of like fitness studies that have been done in this past year, like we had so many things wrong our whole lives in terms of nutrition and workout science. And it's like every day while I'm eating breakfast, I'll just play a little something in the background while I'm getting my breakfast going, and it's just crazy like what I like learned wrong growing up. So that's kind of like my primary interest right now.
Yeah, I agree with you there too. It's like, I'm probably the most healthiest I've been, in years at 50, because it's like, let's see, 2020, I had a mild heart attack, and then I had, I was hospitalized with COVID. That's why I was like, dude, I really got to get serious, And so I've been consistent and disciplined with an exercise routine. But what still gets me is my nutrition, because for one, like you said, a lot of the things that we learn has been wrong. But at the same time, it's just like, I can justify a trip through the Taco Bell drive-through like nobody else,
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
It's like,
as like a once in a while thing, our bodies can handle it, but I don't feel a tremendous amount of like aging pains, but I know that if I keep eating some of the ways I was growing up, I mean, the inflammation and the issues that would happen in my body, wouldn't allow me to have a long career. But beyond that, it's just like, friends of mine have had different forms of cancer and different forms of things. And it's like, I think so much of that comes from our nutrition. So I'm trying to be proactive about it.
Oh yeah, I agree 100%. And then, who are 3 people who've inspired you and you could credit for making you the person you are today?
I know my parents aren't a person, but I'm going to put them together in a category, because I think that I watched them grow. The people that they were when I was, 7 years old when we first moved to California, and the people they are now, the fact that they've continued to grow as people and, and their age, I think is very inspiring, because it shows that, with the right open-minded approach, like you can continue to become your best self even into your 70s and stuff. So to me, that's cool. I mean, the two of them are beautiful and inspiring people. And then I think that it's impossible to be in a marriage or even a long-term relationship without that person being the most influential person in your life. I mean, you spend day in, day out with that person. So my wife, Dany, and I, we have so many similar hobbies. If we go to the gym, we don't always go together, but we likely go together. We speaking of all this nutrition stuff we've been talking about, like she's sort of been leading the charge on that. I've learned a lot from her, and she's a metalhead, and so all of our hobbies line up, and all of our desire to work through past traumas line up. And so I think the people closest to me in my life, my parents and my wife, I mean, are still changing me even at this age.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like I've shared with people, both of my daughters, and I think you met them at a Live Fest. They were like little girls at the time. Now they're young women in college, and they still teach me every day how I can be a better man, huge influences on me. And then, you had mentioned a little bit about your non-profit that you're involved with. Are there any causes or organizations that you support and encourage others to check out?
Yeah, I mean, just to do a brief plug for that, because I'm not asking for anybody's money. We get our funding primarily from the Department of Rehabilitation in California if we're working with California clients. So I'm not asking for anybody's money or anything. I just want people to know that if they've come out of addiction recovery, if they've come out of incarceration, that there are a lot of resources, and a lot of times people are struggling to do things that they could be getting help with. And so whether it's reintegration is the thing that I started, and my buddy Brandon, speaking of big influence in my life, Brandon is a huge positive influence in my life. He works on a daily level to help people in those situations. But I think most people, even if they weren't from California, that they could reach out as an example, and we can network them to like other resources in their particular state. But man, we live in a world where coming out of addiction recovery is not like, doesn't always have to have the stigma that it used to have. And I think that a lot of employers specifically are really open-minded to people that have previously been incarcerated or come out of addiction treatment.
Yeah, I've like I said, I'm still very active in the rooms, and hear so many good stories with where some employers, like if somebody's working a solid program, and it's rigorous honesty, that's somebody that you want on your staff or whatever,
Yeah.
like they would say, with veterans as well and stuff, but that's and what was the name of the organization again?
Ours is called Reintegration. So the existing nonprofit is called Vantage Point, and they, Michelle, who founded that, she had been working with, I'll say like people with like more noticeable disabilities, in terms of like, say somebody was blind, or somebody is in a wheelchair permanently or something like that. And she was helping them finding meaningful employment. That's where the original setup for the nonprofit and the Department of Rehabilitation came in. But then anybody coming out of a traumatic experience, post incarceration, or there's a huge crossover between addiction recovery and mental health, even if it's a temporary, mental health issue. And so those people all qualify for the kind of help that's out there. And I think one of the hardest things, especially for people that have previously been incarcerated, is to like have that humility, like they hear the word disability or assistance or any of those things, and they're like, oh, that's not me, I don't need that. And it's like, dude, there is nothing wrong with acknowledging that you just came out of one of the most brutal environments on the planet. I mean, I'm not saying that I've been through near the types of trauma that like a vet has been through, but it would be weird for somebody to come back from a traumatic experience in war and then say, oh, I don't have PTSD, because it's to their advantage to address those things and to like actually face those traumas. And I think the same thing is true for people coming out of incarceration, that even if they never saw their friends getting stabbed or whatever, they still were institutionalized for a certain period of time, and there's a certain period of time to like adjust back to normal society. And so I just want to encourage people to take help, because it's a beautiful thing, and there's so many great resources available. Awesome.
And then I love asking this one. It takes everybody back, but favorite toy as a child?
So I had this, I don't know if, you're old enough to remember this, maybe. I don't know if you remember this stuffed animal called a pound puppy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I had a pound puppy that I couldn't go visit anybody without taking that thing with me. So
nice. And then we've mentioned a couple times the military, but any message you have for our military members that are currently serving overseas?
Yeah, naturally, some of the people that I've worked with have a crossover, you know, say somebody is dealing with their particular PTSD and they got into addiction as a way to like self-medicate or whatever. But I've met a lot of military guys, and first of all, not all of them come from that particular background, but I've ended up befriending a lot of former military or even active duty guys. And I don't know how or why this is, but there's a certain way that I think people that have, you know, with the healthy mindset, people coming out of incarceration that aren't like institutionalized, not trying to be criminals, there's a certain, you know, there's a certain way that we're able to relate to each other. And I can't describe it. I don't know what, you know, maybe it's the way that our housing, we're all living in barracks, you know, or dorms or whatever it is at some point or whatever it is. But man, I really feel at home around people that have been through the military. And my oldest brother was an Army Ranger for 14 years before he finished his last 6 years at home training other people. And you know, so he's a badass, and I know the amount of work he put in and the love that he has for our country, and I know the sacrifices he's made. And so I with everything in my power, like I want to give the utmost respect to the military guys that have really like helped our country, and whatever you're going through, whatever you've brought home as a result of the difficult circumstances you faced, like if there's ever anything I can do to just show my love and respect and compassion, it's there.
Awesome, man. Tim, thanks a lot, man. It's been great catching up with you. It's been a while, but it was good catching up with you today. Before I let you go, could you do me one last favor?
Of course.
You mind cutting a promo ID for the show? Just introduce yourself, and you're listening to today's Boondoggle.
Yeah. Say Boondoggle podcast or just today's Boondoggle?
Today's Boondoggle podcast. Yeah.
All right. Hey, I'm Tim Lambesis from Austrian Death Machine and As It Lay Dying, and you're listening to today's Boondoggle podcast.
Awesome. Tim, man, thanks again, man. It was so good catching up with you. And yeah, I'll look forward to seeing you at Inkcarceration, and hopefully, you know, Austrian Death Machine will make a Cleveland stop at some point.
Yeah, I hope so too, man. Great catching up.
All right, take care.
All right, later.